Yeah, so I think what's most interesting is if you have to start at the foundations of data, right? And I think there was an era of search where keywords were the foundation of your data. You have an intent and you search for it, and that kind of defines exactly what you're looking for. I think sure there's other contextual things around it that people have built, but I think the core of the search era was the keywords, right? The core of the social era is the data that you write on your news feed or your photographs and stuff that you share on social networks. But if you think about the app ecosystem, right, that's fundamentally neither of them are really useful at the deepest level of understanding the user in terms of how one would actually drive either user acquisition or ultimately user engagement and long-term value. I think what is most important in the app ecosystem is the ability to understand users in terms of their app behavior, right? And when it comes to app behavior, like think of all the things that you as the end user of an app do inside an app, like all the way from the things that go inside your head before you choose to download an app. Why would you pick a certain app over another app? Possibly because your friend recommended it, possibly because you came across an ad, possibly because you had a certain need. So it's not always driven by intent, it's not always driven by your friends, but it's a combination of all of these factors that come into the picture. And you need to understand these levels of attributes that understand why users ultimately download and then behave in a certain way. And I think when you tie back that behavior of what they do to go from the decision of what they want to downloading it to then registering to then actually taking the first few actions, it's a pretty significant engagement that overall sort of comes across, right? And it's a big differentiator from how the web world worked in the past, where everything was an HTML page. There was no real overhead in going to a particular page, right? The whole web was a very seamless, flowing, sort of monolithical thing, but highly hyper-connected. And whereas in the app ecosystem, there are all of these barriers to you taking actions because, I mean, it's for the better or for the worse, but they're far more interactive, which means also far more engagement. But that's also dealing with your ability to invest that time and effort in trying to do that engagement. And the things that trigger those little nuances in your head that say like now you want to take that next action or not are the building blocks of how everything else should be built on top of it, right? I mean, it's the number of user stories crossed with the number of possible interactions that a user might do, right? Because every interaction has a story in itself, right? I mean, the reason why you actually chose to sign up for some app has a whole story behind it. The reason why you would want to actually take a picture on WhatsApp versus some other app has a story behind it, like either your friends are on it or because like you just had a baby and then you want to share your pictures. And so for instance, I'll give you my story, right? My story, I just had a baby 4 months ago, and my mom, she's never ever been on a mobile phone before, right? I mean, the most she has had is a simple Nokia phone for the large part of her last 2 months. Like even that was a huge sort of step jump for her. But ever since I've had the baby, and she lives in a different city, I live in a different city, and what she wants to see a picture of the baby every day, and the urge to have that like has automatically propelled her into buying a phone in the first place, into understanding how to use WhatsApp, into understanding how to connect with people, into understanding how like you do it. Now she's a full-blown WhatsApp user. Like I mean, so from very quickly, the thing that urged her to go into becoming a full-blown WhatsApp user was actually the trigger of me having a kid. And so you need to understand all the interactions and why people choose to go one way or the other. And I think like therein lies the beauty of understanding like how people will actually ultimately behave with these apps. So I think one of the key things is, I think obviously everything is subject to users' privacy, right? So we don't want to we want to stay away from anything that might remotely touch upon users' sort of private behavior. But I think a lot of apps fundamentally encourage interactions and the ability to track and analyze those interactions, whether it's just within the realms of the app itself or across their distribution channels or across kind of other services that they bring to the table, right? So I think there's enough need for people to capture these elements of data individually to provide better services to people, right? And I think, and that's where the core of capturing that data has to start. Because the reason why somebody would have your data around all the way from your basics on whether or not you choose to log in to maybe your financial data is only because they give you something very compelling in return within the context of those apps. And some elements of those are valuable from a distribution partner perspective as well. So if we are a huge distribution partner for some of those applications, there is inherent sort of benefits in trying to share that with us. So I think and so all of this data sort of has this cross-pollination effect where I think every partner has some effect of the data. You kind of bring it back to them in even more sort of brilliance, but largely because you're adding value through the algorithms and the understanding. Right? So I think one of the things that we are focusing on is to understand we believe algorithms are a manifestation of how we think humans think. So we are actually spending a lot of time in trying to understand how human cognition works, right? And our algorithms are trying to mimic how human cognition behaves. So like people, when they share the data with us and our ability to sort of manifest that back into a far more useful insight is because of the way we think of how human cognition actually operates. So when you take that human cognition, make it into algorithms, and then manifest that in the form of transformations of that data, you can actually bring immense value back to the user, right? And so like that makes this like sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where from data you generate more interactions, more engagement, and that interaction and engagement drives more data, and it's just kind of a very happy thing for the user ultimately, right? Because I think, ultimately those cases where my mom now wants to use the next app which will bring her more joy, either in terms of seeing not only pictures but maybe hearing the voice or like doing a walkie-talkie behavior or something else where like if she never hears of those things, she'll never have those interactions with my baby, and it's really important for all of those interactions to be kind of available because my baby's only going to be 4 months for a month, and I would rather he and my mom have those interactions now rather than her repent later that, oh, if I'd only known this app existed, I would have had these interactions with my grandchild.